The Heart Brain SocioNeural Style, as you mentioned a moment ago, David, really leans into and appreciates and emphasizes the importance of teamwork, connection, rapport, consensus. Tell us more about some of those strengths and what becomes apparent and obvious and therefore is prioritized by those heart brain social neural style types, but also maybe unpack a little bit of what's missed and how that degree they're leaning into it is going to have some cost and when it comes to limitations and blind spots.
Yeah. So when I am heart brain socio-neural style, which I am, so I'm going to try to edit myself and keep this as short as I can. I am relational. I am empathetic. I tend towards agreeability. I am more emotional than I am logical. That doesn't mean I'm illogical, but it just means what am I going to lead with, right? I'm going to start with like, when I hear someone speak, the first thing I'm thinking is like, all right, well, how does that impact how he's feeling, how I'm feeling, how so-and-so might feel later, right? And then after that, I can get to like, all right, how does this make sense in the abstract? How is this thoughtful or not? What are the potential outcomes of that? And sometimes it can be a minute, and sometimes it can be a year. Sometimes it can be 4 years, right? So it really depends. That might have something to do with someone's maturity level or not. I'm not sure. This is, a fairly new way of looking at people's styles, but I know there's going to be a gap. I've seen it in myself and in others. But to continue with that definition, I am very interested. And what's my curiosity? My curiosity is like, why did they decide that? I mean, I could go back to when I was very little and my first memories like, oh, I wonder why they did that. I thought everyone was like that. I thought everyone wanted to know what's the emotional motivation of this person who did that thing. Turns out that's not true, right? 66% of people probably don't care. They're head brain or gut brain, but also who is impacted by it. And like these are your values people, right? Like people who champion values, people who are really good at influence. Even something like social media influencers, look at how they either are or are merely performatively heart brain people, just pretending to worry about how other people feel. But either way, it tells us kind of the same story, which is like the heart brain people are the ones who are very good at influencing because when they speak with a kind of sense of authority about like, yeah, we're all in this together.
Yeah, I love that approach and the emphasis on the connectivity and the empathy there. What does it look like for a heart brain person what's going on when they're experiencing friction with perhaps somebody that's a different style? Where is that an opportunity for them to expand their range and fluency across styles?
Yeah. So when it comes to someone who's more of a head brain style, they're going to be wondering, well, that was a great vision that you just laid out. It's really creative, but like, do you realize that you just left out like so-and-so's team? Do you realize that you just didn't, you just totally forgot that so-and-so just had a pair of twins. And then the product you pitched, for babies had nothing to do with twins. Something like that. I'm just coming off the top of my head, right? Like a heart brain leader would at the very least drop in and be like, like so-and-so who just had a pair of twins. We want to make sure this something they're going to sew it in, right? So the friction is with the head brain person is probably going to be like, you're leaving out an important piece. How does that match our core values? They're going to be the one that brings that up. Like, I don't understand how that matches our core values, right?
Right.
With the gut brain person, it'll be different. The gut brain person they're going to operate in a way less about overlooking something and because the head brain person might have thought about it as an idea, but dismissed it. You know, they actually because they think about a lot of things, and then dismiss that idea. The gut brain person might never even think of it in the first place. So the heart brain person might be like, they're so naive, they're so obtuse, right? Like, okay, yeah, I want to focus on outcomes also, but you can get better outcomes if you include team bonding, for example, right? Like, hey, you say you want these outcomes. How come you never talk about team bonding being like something important? Seems like a no-brainer to me that if the team is firing on all cylinders, that you're probably going to get better outcomes and faster feedback loops.
Yeah, one of the things I just had a conversation with a client the other day where this came up, and they were talking about one of their colleagues, and they were like, they just don't care. And after unpacking that, and I introduced the social neural styles with them, and they were able to immediately identify themselves as a heart brain social neural style. And then after some further prompts, they were able to guess that their colleague was probably a gut brain. And it wasn't they didn't care; they cared very deeply. They just weren't seeing. They weren't. It wasn't like they cared differently about the same thing. They just weren't seeing the same things in the first place. They were seeing different things. Yeah. So that to me is an example that came to my mind of where the style can illuminate how we will label somebody as not caring or not appreciating or not seeing, when it just perhaps reveals that we're looking at two things entirely differently. And that's where that increase in range and fluency can be such a value add for heart brains, just as much as the others.